Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and I don't like playing favorites with the decks that I receive, but every now and then I get decks that just speak to me profoundly, and this is one of them. This is Bruna, the Fading Light Self-Mill. And we could say Self-Mill Reanimator, or we could say Self-Mill Meld. So this deck comes to us from Erica, and they say, one of my favorite all-time decks, but as my playgroup has gotten higher and higher in power, the deck keeps getting worse. The main game plan is to self-mill a bunch and use Bruna to reanimate a big Angel Bomb on cast. I love the idea of trying to make mono white self-mill work, especially all the little tricks and synergies between the weird artifacts like Underworld Cookbook. I also like being able to use the graveyard as a toolbox for answers like Ruined Halo or Pithing Needle. The big problem comes with the deck, card draw and ramp. It's hard to know how much draw I should run, as drawing many cards is worse than milling them. Additionally, it's hard to find good ways to ramp outside of mana rock spam in mono white. Bruna being 7 mana makes the lack of consistent ramp a big issue, but as many games are brought to a halt by praying to top deck a land. Well, if you pray to this angel, just be worried, be a little worried about what might answer you. I had to put the joke in. No hard restrictions, but I'd like to avoid super expensive cards that aren't already included. I own the deck in paper, and adding things like the Moxes would be difficult. Oh, don't worry, I am going to say some expensive cards, I'm not going to lie, but they seem to be in budget with the deck, and I don't think they're too expensive, and they're all going to be optional. So we're gonna do our best to stay within it, but we'll have a lot of cheap cards to add first. But before we get any further, this is a great time to remind you that the deck list will be in the video description below, and if you would like to send me your own deck so that I can take a look at it, there is a link to that in the video description. And in addition, you could also, donate towards the channel to make your video one of the 2 videos I work on every day the channel's active. But all that aside, let's get right into it, because honestly, I love this and I'm super, super excited. Bruna, the Fading Light. She is a 7 mana angel horror. She's 5/7 for your trouble with flying and vigilance, and she says when you cast Bruna the Fading Light, you may return target angel or human creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is on cast. Why is it on cast? Well, because what this is becoming and has on cast abilities is Eldrazi. If you meld her with Gisela, the Broken Blade, which we'll find in the deck list itself, you will get Brizella, Voice of Nightmares, Flying First Strike Vigilance Lifelink, 9/10 Eldrazi Angel. Your opponents can't cast spells with converted mana 3 or less. So, this is an incredibly powerful way to finish the game incredibly fast, but in the meantime, this is just kind of one of our win conditions. The deck itself, I'm super, super impressed with. I think this is such a fun idea. We are using our deck list as a mill in mono white, which is often very difficult to do, but we're going to use our graveyard as our second hand. Now, there's a few limitations to this, of course. The biggest one, of course, being that if our graveyard is disrupted, we are having a hard time. We can't really operate a lot of our deck, though we have cards like Loran the Third Path, which hopefully can get us around Rest in Peace or other such graveyard hate. We do kind of get hated out pretty easily, so we have to be somewhat cognizant of that. But even with that being said, the deck idea itself is so good and so strong. I absolutely love it. So what am I going to try to do here? Well, my main game plan is we're going to try to improve the ramp a little bit. And then we have a section where we're going to try to put in some generically good cards that I think the deck is somewhat missing. And then finally, we're going to try to get into some, how do I put this? Cards I hope you can kind of afford. That sounds terrible. No, just more powerful cards. Because what we're talking about here is that, honestly, we have a limit to the power of mono white. And that limit is going to kind of peak at certain strategies until we start adding cards like, spoilers, Drannith Magistrate. And we're getting close to that point. This deck idea is really, really strong, and we're going to try to shave down some of the more clumsy parts of it, but this deck will need a bit of a power level boost in card quality and not just strategy. I think the strategy itself is really, really good. That being said, I have a secondary edition that I think will, at a low price, do a lot for the deck, but we're going to get through all of that once we get into our editions. Looking quickly at our curve, I like it very much. It's obvious why it goes so far, especially with our later mana cards that we aim to reanimate more than we aim to cast themselves, with Eldrazi Conscription being one of our, what would we say, like an exception to that rule. But otherwise, we have a really, really nice curve. So, without going too far into that, let's just see what cards that stand out at me. And honestly, as we usually do, a lot of the cards that stand out at me are the higher mana cards. And what I think we need to cut down on is what I believe to be some of the less effective angel finishers, because they cost a lot of mana and they're not going to get us anywhere in a reasonable way. So I'm going to go backwards through the creatures and find the ones that I don't like. Akroma is interesting. I don't mind Akroma as much here, mainly because she provides so much power. In theory, she provides, so she herself is really big, but looking at our angels, most of them are flying with a second ability, so she gives at least +2/+2. A kind of funny way to play Elish Norn. Because, I mean, she's an angel, so we can get her back, so I agree with that decision there. But with certain other cards, you know, like Sun Titan, like Pristine Angel, that's just going to give +1/+1. So though I like her, I think she caps out not as high as I would like. I think if you were using this with like Odric, which I don't believe we are, if we had Odric as well so that we could spread all those abilities about and therefore spread the bonus around a bit more, I would like it a bit. I would like it, but right now she just kind of stands as just a really big beater. And that's going to be kind of a trend here. A lot of these cards are just big beaters, and I would like to, I think we need to drop them. Pristine Angel is another one where she's just a fancy Sarah Angel, really. I get that she can't be targeted, but she can actually, right? When we attack with her, there is a moment where she can be targeted and we can try to respond with instant spells. But as you may note, we have 3 instant spells in the deck, so really there is a hard limit on protecting her. So she is also a pretty easy cut. Lyra Dawnbringer as well, though a really great angel tribal kind of, you know, leader or support part, is just not good enough for the power level this deck is going for. She once again is just a 5/5 that gives +1/+1 across the board, and we already have a much better angel in our command zone, so why are we playing something like this? Likewise, of course, Enduring Angel, though really, really interesting. I kind of like what this does, so I'm less hard on her. There is a limit to her strength, and she is, because she doesn't have, you know, she doesn't have hexproof. She's vulnerable to being destroyed and then your opponent's just taking you out of the game. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting card, but I think it's, once again, at this power level, it's just a bit of a liability more than anything else. Looking at the rest, though, I mean, Surgrid, God Favored. I like that she has flash, but and the blinking of it is kind of interesting, but I think we can still do better. Is this, how do we do this? So we flash her in, her trigger, because it's just one trigger on the stack because we have to target. Yeah, so we can't even use, this isn't like the old O-ring style cards where you can use like a flicker spell to get 2 copies of her. So once again, just a card that's just a little weak on removal, and I don't know if I love. But beyond that, I really do like the rest of our creature setup. So I really do like those. And And looking at artifacts, I also don't have that many cuts here either. I think Grind Clock is one that I like to get rid of. It's just really, really slow. Like I love the art and I love the flavor, but it's just so slow. You kind of desperately need Unwinding Clock to make it work. And even then, it's just not really good at self-milling in the same way other cards that you have will do a much better job, much more reliably. So I think Grind Clock stands out as a card that I don't particularly like. Now, Eldrazi Conscription, I have a hard time. I'm not going to say cut it. I'd want more ways to cheat it into play, but I think it's fine because you have so many tutors for it. But it is something that I notice is not as ideal. Right, so Concerted Effort is the card that works with Akroma. I knew I saw this somewhere, but even then, I think I would just prefer the Odric Lunarch Marshal, because I just think the chances of you getting it to do what you want are just so much higher, right? Because getting this permanent out, Concerted Effort, is a lot harder than a creature you can reanimate with your own commander and by other means. So I like Odric a lot more, but if you're not playing Odric and you're not playing Akroma, I would get rid of the Concerted Effort too. I want to say Cast Out, but that's because I just saw it. And I think the rest is good. I really like this aura setup that you have, where you have let's see, Auramancer, you have Heloid's Pilgrim, you have Monk Idealist, and you have, let's see, Spectral Steel. All of these, I like this collection to pull auras out of our deck, but I kind of wish we had something a little better than Eldrazi Conscription, because Conscription is it's more mana than your commander. It's really strong, and I don't know, I'm just going to take a stab in the dark. Let's put white, let's put aura, and let's see what's the best aura according to EDH Rec. Let's go, just to see if there's anything that really speaks to me really quickly. And it really doesn't look like it. That's the thing that's kind of frustrating, is there's not just like this instant win aura that we can attach. And even the ones like Tenuous Truce and like, I'm thinking the White Curse, which I really like, are still not like really good. You could play more like On Thin Ice effects to pull them out of your grave, like to have more removal, but I don't really like that. Overwhelming Splendor is interesting, but it's the same mana cost as Eldrazi Conscription, so I'd rather the Conscription. I wish there was something else. Something that would get you like, there's Curse of Silence, but something that would get you quite a bit of advantage really easily. Now, the ones that just grab enchantments are really good to grab Smothering Tithe, and the ones that grab enchantment or equipment, you can use that for the Dowsing Daggle. So I do really like it, but maybe Curse of Conformity? I don't even think that. I think it's kind of tricky. There's just not like this one, like it's, not that there's tons and tons of it, but like if we were in blue-white or something, I think we'd have better selection of just like a very strong aura, but we are somewhat limited. So I really like the idea, but I don't know outside of Eldrazi Conscription what we grab. I might think on this a bit further. But honestly, looking at the rest of the deck, I really do like it. There's so many just like clean cards that I just think are really nice, and outside of the cards that I suggested cutting, there's not that many cuts. Like the deck itself is in a really good place. I think at most there might be things like I wouldn't mind getting rid of, where are you? Ratchet Bomb I'm having a hard time with, honestly. It's just so slow to do anything. And because if you look at our artifacts list of going like, it's very low, you're very likely to destroy your own artifacts. And like, it's not like you're going to get other people's Pithing Needles when you have a Pithing Needle out. So I think this is another card that I think is a little weaker. So those are my general cuts. And you might be like, well, Cursed, you took out all of the big angels. What are we going to reanimate? Well, I'm going to put some humans in, and I'm going to have some other cards that I think are definitely worth playing. So let's just go to our additions, because I do really like where this is going, and I want to go through the things I want to add. So first and foremost, when we talk about ramp, these two cards immediately come to mind, which is Knight of the White Orchid and Loyal Warhound. Now, only the Knight you can pull out with your commander, but you can still use Savine's Reclamation, and if you want to put other cards such as the our new 1-mana Reanimator 3. Oops, I keep pressing the wrong buttons. Let's go Advance. Let's go 1-mana. Return creature and white. See if we can find it. Helping Hand, that's what it is. So you can use something like Helping Hand to grab some of these cards back. Sorry, I got kind of confused. I lost my track, but we'll come back to that. So Helping Hand is a card that I'd like you to run, that you can reanimate a bunch of your cards. But let's go back to the main, like the creatures I want you to bring back. So like Knight of the White Orchid and Loyal Warhounds. Right, so the Knight can come back with your commander. Both can come back from Helping Hand or Savine's Rec. These are just good cards. They're the ramp you have access to in white. You should be using it. It might feel a bit tricky because at a certain point, your opponents are less likely to have more lands than you. But as long as you're second, or not first, I should say, you have a really high chance of getting these off really early, and that advantage will be really, really powerful. Next, immediately I have two cards that are a little more expensive, but I can't not suggest them, and that's Drannith Magistrate and Archivist of Ogma. Drannith Magistrate is just, I don't think we need to talk about it. We always see it. It's just such a good card in white, especially in mono white, and you should definitely be playing it if you can grab a copy. Archivist of Ogma is much more affordable at $5 and is like a very, very powerful card. I think this card is somewhat underappreciated, but the amount of cards Archivist tends to draw me is usually 2 to 4, and I do play a play group. Sorry, I'm thinking of a card right now, but I do play a play group that has a lot more tutoring. But if you have something like the Initiative, which is what I was just thinking of as we should add in. Initiative. This is not my best spelling day. I've moved my mic in front of my keyboard, and it's hard to. I'm making excuses, but it's hard to type. All right, 3. Where's our White Plume Adventure? So something like the Initiative, which you can find in a lot of different playgroups these days. So you don't even need like high fetch lands or huge tutors. Things like the Initiative, things like, ramp in green, there's often a lot of searching going on, and you tend to draw a lot of cards off of it. So Archivist is a really easy inclusion, but White Plume Adventure is definitely an inclusion that's worth considering. Now, it's an Orc Cleric. I don't know if the other enter the battlefield, gain initiative creatures in white, I don't know if they are humans, which might be worth considering. Yes, so this one here is a human. So maybe something worth considering because you can reanimate it with your commander. However, White Plume Adventurer can also be reanimated by Savine's Rec, by your Sun Titan or Helping Hand, so I like it a little more. So White Plume Adventurer is really good. It'll get you the basics that you need. And where is the? I won't let you see the Undercity unless you click it. So it'll let you grab the basics and a bunch of other benefits. And usually when you're in mono white, you have the most creatures, so you're able to hold that defense, or with your angels easily get the defense back. Namely, White Plume Adventure allows you to untap some of your creatures, and I find that makes it really easy to hold that defense. So those are a few cards here. How much is White Plume? White Plume is just $1, so I do like this. Another one that I think is notably missing is Thalia. I know it's another card I tend to recommend all the time, but this is the exact kind of deck that really benefits from Thalia. Yes, we have a lot of artifacts. That is the one thing that I think is a bit of a cost, but we have them low enough in mana that I don't think it's too much of a problem. But our instant sorceries and enchantments are just really low in number. The majority of our decks is creatures, and therefore Thalia is really, really attractive. This will be really good against a number of decks that you face, and she'll be a really easy turn to play that will slow down your opponents, get you to the point that you can get to that 7 mana for Bruna. Then another card that unfortunately is more expensive than I remember at, it seems like $10. Amiria is something that I would recommend the most for you to build towards, as it kind of does what your deck wants to do. You need 7 or more planes, which is, you know, unfortunately that's 8 mana on the battlefield, but then every upkeep you get to reanimate. This does what your commander does, but even better. This does what your deck wants to do. This is definitely something I think that's worth getting, excuse me. And I think even with, like, that's such a high number and it's hard to ramp into in these colors, I think it's very, very feasible for you to be able to get to this number. So with that in mind, you should be able to slowly, I would budget for this one over a lot of these other cards just because it feels so on point. Then another land that's a little more expensive, but I do really think is important, is Urza's Saga. So Urza's Saga is just such a good card. I play Modern, I use it in my Hammer Time deck. It's very, very strong. But here especially, it's good because 1, it gives you something to do with your mana. 2, it allows you to pull out some of these really, really strong 1 mana cards that kind of basically turn your deck on. From, where are you? Underworld Cookbook to Pithing Needle, to grab one of your baubles, in order to get another card, to even get a Shredder or a Ghoul Collar Bell. Like, these are really, really good cards, and I think they're worth pulling out of your deck. But you also have the means to repeatedly reanimate Urza's Saga every time, threatening to keep going on the construct plan. So I really, really like this as a backup plan. I think it's really strong in your deck. It does have a price tag. So this one is definitely, I think, is one of the most expensive card. I think it's the expensive card. Yeah, there's one more that's close, but otherwise this is the expensive card that I'm going to suggest to you. And I leave this to you. It is probably the last card you want to get in terms of the most you can get for your money. But in a deck like this, it will absolutely pull your weight. If you have friends that are okay with proxies, proxy this card. We all know this version of the card right here already looks like a proxy. You'll be fine. I'm a big fan of proxying things. If your play group isn't, that's rough. If you're going to take this to places where you need actual cards, that's also rough. But for me, this is one of those cards that'll give you a lot of power into your deck. And if you were to play this, by the way, I think it'd be very beneficial for you to play Expedition Map. Expedition Map. I can't spell and I can't type. What a day. Expedition Map, just to ensure that you can get the saga out more often, would really be worthwhile. I know it's a lot, but I do have to suggest it because it's just very, very, very good. How much is Chrome Mox? I assume that's the one you were talking about. Okay. We're not at Chrome Mox money, so I feel a little better. All right, next, I think something that is a bit missing is removal. And I'm actually giving you more cards than I've told you to take out, so it's going to be a bit tricky, but something like Prison Term, something like Cast Out, especially Cast Out, I get why they're here, but I think in the same way, you can't really go bad with the classics. Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, and Get Lost are really, really good. And I think, here's the thought. I completely get how they're not like in theme, and they're not as good because you can't pull them out of your graveyard. But we don't play these cards because, you know, they're in theme. Like, we don't like giving people lands with Path to Exile. We do it because at a certain power level, you just need you need the methods to answer problems. And Swords to Plowshare and Path to Exile especially are so strong and so powerful to just take out cards that will allow your opponents to just get out of control, that I think they're almost universally worth playing. So I don't think you need to play all three, but some combination I think would be really good. Get Lost is interesting because it is more mana and more expensive in money, but it also hits creatures, enchantments, and planeswalkers, and map tokens are just not as good. It's much better than the other one that makes a clue token. So I think this card is really, really interesting. Also, the art's great, but all right. Now we're going to get to the half of more experimental stuff. Let's do this one first, because I don't think this is necessarily an experiment. I think this is a tried and true thing, and I think you need this in there. So Revelark. If you're not familiar, or for those who are not familiar, Revelark is a part of a two to three card, let's say a 3-card combo. And that combo is with Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide, Revelark, and a sack outlet, like you have here, Altar of Dementia, basically create a loop where Revelark pulls Karmic Guide out of the graveyard and Karmic Guide pulls Revelark out of the graveyard, while reanimating, extra cards with power 2 or less. But really, it's about that, just those 2 cards coming back in and out of the graveyard repeatedly. And then when you have something like Altar of Dementia, you can either dig your own deck to find like something to go along with the combo, which is something you do in probably like if you couldn't target your opponents, I guess. I'm trying to think of a reason you would do that. Or you use the altar and you just target your opponents with it, right? And you just mill them all out of the game. I guess if they had like an Eldrazi or something, that's something you can do. But and I'm thinking of like Ulamog or Kozilek that shuffle, or Darksteel, or Blightsteel. So if they have those, you can try to find another card to go off and like just fill your graveyard with your deck, and then move almost all of it onto the battlefield. But generally, with those 3 cards, you're going to mill out all your opponents in one go and then win the game. Now, I don't know how you feel about infinite combos like that. I would really, really heavily suggest it. One, this is a 60-cent card. We've been talking about the price of some of these cards that I'm suggesting, and Revelark is a 60-cent card. So this is honestly, at this power level, you need to have these kind of I win combos, and Revelark is a really, really good one. It is also really good that you can do most of it. Like if you can get Altar onto the battlefield yourself, if both Revelark and Karmic Guide are in the graveyard, Bruna is able to start the combo, pulling out the Karmic Guide, which then pulls out the Revelark, which then you sack both of them. Revelark brings back Karmic Guide, and so on and so forth. So I think this is definitely the strongest thing you should be adding. I know I said like saving up for Emeria is fun because it's on flavor. If you're looking to win games, Revelark is the direction I would suggest. It's up to you how many more support cards you'd want to put into this. I don't think you need to put any. I think just putting Revelark is enough for the deck, because there's going to be situations that you're just going to cast Revelark anyways and reanimate 2 creatures. And I think you're going to be really happy with that. So I think already this is a really good card, and I think my top inclusion for the deck. All right, now we're getting into a few of stronger cards and then kind of a side idea. So one of the cards is Enlightened Tutor. I think you're already using tutors, and this one is just really good because it'll grab you Smothering Tithe, and for that reason I kind of want it in your deck. I think your deck really obviously benefits from Smothering Tithe. Let's be honest, all decks do, but your deck especially will use that ramp. So being able to have another copy of it that end of your last opponent's turn, you can put Smothering Tithe on top and cast it immediately. You're going to be really, really happy with that. And the fact that this also grabs Eldrazi Conscription among your other enchantments, and it's or artifacts. Yeah, this card is really good. And the fact that this pulls out any of your artifacts, including Altar for your combo, I think is really, really nice. So definitely something worth considering. And then something else that I think is somewhat worth considering is Teleportation Circle. I think it's close. This one's only this far into the list because it is $5, and I don't know if it's worth the $5. You have a lot of cards that I think you'd be really happy with blinking. From Auramancers to Heloid's Pilgrims to Loran, Loran, I'm actually not sure. All of these cards that are really, really good to flicker, right? Not even including, some of your bigger stuff like Sun Titan and the like, or Karmic Guide. But I just don't know if it's enough. I think it's just shy of being enough. I think there's just going to be a lot of situations where you don't have any, even with the inclusion of some of the cards like White Plume Adventurer or Loyal Warhound or Knight of the White Orchid. I think it's just going to be just close enough that it might not be worth it. So what I would do is I would keep this in your mind. Just keep this in your head, so that if you put in more Enter the Battlefield effects, this will just be a really good card to use as the power of the deck goes in that direction. I don't know if for sure I want it in here right now. Then the final card of that's worth a lot that I'm going to give to you is one that goes well with Teleportation Circle, but it is once again a little higher in price than I'd like at $30, and that's Ranger Captain of Eos. Ranger Captain of Eos is just such a good card, And when we get into a high power level in white, we kind of have to run this. My mentality is that if you're running Esper Sentinel and you have the ability to run like you can save up money to grab Ranger Captain. Ranger Captain is just like a really, really natural inclusion because you're going to use this almost universally to grab Esper Sentinel, but you have Salvage Scout and Weathered Wayfarer, so it's not 100% of the time. But Ranger Captain is just so strong, like blindingly strong. And that sacrifice ability that works almost like a silence is going to be so integral on the turns that you want to go use Revelark to win, or you want to use Bruna and Gisela to create your Eldrazi, right? That to make what was her name? Brisella. So with that in mind, I do really like it here, but this is really far down the list. This is only when you have the funds for it. It is a card that I really, really think is strong, but it doesn't do as much as like just putting Revelark in. All right, so I have one set of cards to introduce as a side plan, and then I have one fun card to put in. So what happens if you look at all of this and you're like, Cursed, I like a lot of the suggestions, but a lot of these suggestions are too much money, and you know what? I'm not spending this money, and I'm going to just keep losing games if it doesn't. Like, it's one card. If I just put Ranger Captain in, I spend my whole budget on it, it's just going to be one card, and it's not going to make me win more games because it's just one card. I agree. I think that's a really reasonable way to think of this. So something we have access to in mono white that I really, really like, and this is a bit of an answer to your card draw problem. I've mainly kind of avoided the problem because I think the deck is actually good enough with card draw, but let's say we have that problem where like we still feel like the card draw isn't good enough and we're still losing to our opponents. We have another direction to go into, and that's the Rule of Law direction. And what I mean by that is we play Rule of Law, we play Archon of Emeria, and we play Deafening Silence, and we play Eidolon of the Rhetoric. These spells all basically do the same thing, Deafening Silence being the one exception, is a little more specific, but the other three all say each player cannot cast more than one spell each turn. What's the idea here? Well, the idea here is instead of trying to accelerate yourself to defeating 3 opponents in card draw and card value when you are mono white, why not bring them back to your level? This is something red does and something that white does a lot that I think is a little underused. Rule of Law just wastes all your opponent's card draw. They can have 10 Rhystic Studies, but they're still casting 1 spell a turn. Now, don't get me wrong, they're going to probably win the game with that amount of card advantage if your opponents aren't like keeping them in check, but it does like greatly invalidate a lot of advantages they might have. If you don't have a good collection of instant speed or flash speed spells, you could have 500 treasures, and if you can't use them, they're just meaningless. So these kind of effects are really, really good in a deck like this. You need time, you need the ability to slow the game down. These cards are going to do this. And while the game is slowed, you're going to take the time to pull out your combo or Brisella. Now, very noteworthy, as I pointed out before, this combo with Revelark doesn't actually use any additional spells, so these Rule of Law effects are really, really good with it, right? So you don't have to worry about it affecting you. And in general, you're just going to be pretty happy because your opponents are going to be stuck casting 1 spell a turn, and maybe you were already just casting 1 spell a turn. The turn you cast Bruna, you're not casting another spell. So that's already a turn that you might as well have been under Rule of Law. So why not just play Rule of Law and force other people to behave the same way you do? That's I think a really strong angle, but it is a 4-card inclusion in a deck that I've only asked you to take out, I think, like 7 cards, and I've obviously suggested so many more. This deck is so cool. I think it's really caught my imagination. So that is something I would suggest. And finally, the last card, as I like to suggest, is Jailbreak. Jailbreak is such a good card, especially here, being able to pull out your, have more reanimation in your deck. And this is permanent, right? So this is any one of these cards. So everything outside of instant sorcery. So this works really well with your self-mill because you don't particularly mind what you're pulling out. And as always, the floor is you have an opponent with a land in the graveyard, you get to reanimate a land. And that's really easy to do when you have Ghoul Caller's Bell and Codex Shredder, right? So you can easily guarantee a land in yours and an opponent's graveyard, and then you play Jailbreak just like it's 2-mana ramp. So that's the floor. What's the ceiling? Well, you have so many really, really good cards to bring back. I have 100%. What have I done? I have reanimated an opponent's, I forget what it is. It was like this green elemental that was like 6 mana or more. Something that was, oh, it was, what was it? It's the one that makes plants. That really, God, that's really going to bother me. But the really, really strong green makes a plant for each land. Everyone knows this card. I don't like it very much, but regardless, I reanimated that for my opponents, and they got tons of plants. They were ready to win the next game, their next turn. But the card I picked, and this was in my Bruna deck, is I picked Karmic Guide, and I used that to do the combo and win the game with Revelark. So the ceiling on Jailbreak is so, so, so high. Even if you don't have Karmic Guide out, it's really easy to get something like Smothering Tide back. You give someone back their Solemn Simulacrum, their, I don't know, and you have lots of 4-mana cards, a lot of, I don't know, any creature, especially in Tribal, you can give them back Beast Whisperer, or that's especially Beast Whisperer, and you get back Smothering Tide. That is such a good deal. And then later, if you're able to fund it, something like Ranger Captain being able to be brought back with Jailbreak is so strong because you get another card, you get another turn of protection, etc., etc. And that's where I'm going to stop my suggestions. Honestly, this is a fantastic deck. Thank you so much, Erica, for sending it. I really like this idea. I really do like mono white as a commander like color, and I think it has a lot of power just by itself, but I really do like the direction you went with it with the self mill. So these are my answers. I don't usually like suggesting so many cards that are kind of expensive, but I think I know, I'm feeling the power level your deck's at, and I think this is kind of the point that we need to kind of budget the deck out a little bit, because with that in mind, that's how we're going to make it stronger. But as I said before, if there's one card I would add, it would be Revelark, because with that, I think the deck has what it needs, an instant I win combo that gets you out of situations where otherwise you wouldn't be able to win the game. I hope this video was helpful, and if you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below, where you can also find a link that you can bring your deck to the front of the queue. I swear, at some point I'm going to, make this into an outro as soon as I have the ability, and I'll never forget saying it halfway through. But until then, if you could like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube thing, I would love that. And I love this deck. I hope to see more of it. This is the kind of deck I think I would love to bring to, like a Friday Night Magic, or to, a friend's channel or something. I think I have these cards, so I think I'm going to think about it a little bit. But until then, good luck.